with that, we are live for episode 8 of Core Setting. In this week's episode, we're going to be talking about the Season 1 premiere of Star Trek Picard.
Season 1 finale.
Finale, sorry. I always get that wrong. How you doing this morning, Bill?
Doing well.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it. I've been eager to talk about this for a couple days now.
Apologize for missing the originally scheduled Core Setting, but we...
Start date.
Yeah.
It worked out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a couple days. I've had some time to digest it. I'm looking forward to diving in and seeing what you think. We haven't talked about it a little bit off air, but not a lot of detail.
Yeah.
So what was your what do you think about the episode as a whole, the way the season ended? What's your big takeaway?
Big takeaway is I loved it. I think we're going to get into it, obviously, but there's a lot of stuff that happened. They had a lot to wrap up on. Some stuff that we more or less expected, some stuff that we didn't.
Right.
So, but I like this episode more than I did the first part, because I guess technically this is a 2-part episode, so
right.
I liked it more. I like the second part more. So
yeah, I think we both kind of talked about last week. Last week was kind of an odd episode of this week. We covered a handful of episodes. We did a little bit on part 1, but didn't go into a whole lot because I think we both felt like it was clearly a half of a story, and there was a lot that was going to be answered and clarified in part 2, and I think that happened. I think this is a 2-parter that it's tough not to look at as a complete story.
Yeah.
2 episodes put together. So I do think this was a stronger hour than the first part was. There were some satisfying conclusions to some of the threads that were started in the first part.
Yeah.
The most interesting thing about this episode to me, and I've seen a lot of discussion of it on Twitter, it seems to be the common talking point here, is the sort of epilogue. The last 15 minutes or so are so kind of overpowering that the first 30 minutes of it, 35 minutes of it, the wrap up of the story proper that we've kind of been building all season, almost feels like an afterthought. Like it almost you quickly leave that behind and you get to this other thing that's also been kind of hanging over the entire season for Picard. But for fans of Star Trek and of these characters, that resolution that we get is so huge that it's almost impossible to not look at that episode through the lens of that alone for me. I don't even know. I mean, I guess the first thing, how do we want to do this? do we want to talk about that first and then double back to some of the other stuff?
Finish with let's just do everything but because I have a feeling that it's going to take some time to work through that last 15 minutes.
Sure.
So let's get through the front half of the episode. What did you think of the wrap up of pretty much the whole storyline of the whole series?
I think it was mostly satisfying. I think it was nice to see the crew kind of work together to solve the problem, which we started seeing, come together in the first half, including Narek, the Romulan agent, kind of sees the light, and that the only way to stop this is to work together with our heroes. It's in true kind of Star Trek fashion, 2-part fashion, big problem fashion. I think there are elements of it that feel maybe a little bit rushed, a little bit quick. People traveling potentially kind of vast distances
pretty quickly,
in fairly quick fashion. This episode sort of hinges on Dr. Girardi breaking Picard out and getting back to the ship, and the ship kind of getting up and running and up into space. I think that maybe happens a little quick and a little easy, but that's kind of, I would say, par for the course for Star Trek. But there's a lot of that. This is certainly not the first time we've seen convenience and acceleration of time for the purpose of telling the story. But yeah, I think Ian mentions it here. I think this episode all kind of leads to this point where we have the android colony building this beacon that's going to bring this other artificial intelligence in to do this destructive thing to organic life, which leads to a nose-to-nose kind of situation with the Romulan fleet that's on the way, and a Starfleet fleet that also shows up, led by Captain Riker, acting Captain Riker, which is a whole nother cool thing. But what Ian says in the chat is maybe my favorite thing about the episode, other than the last 15 minutes, which is that in true TNG fashion, the two fleets resolve this issue through ideas and through conversation and through means other than phasers and disruptors going at it. I like that resolution a lot. I like that they didn't come to blows. That felt very TNG, and it felt Star Trek to me.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that as much as we would like to see maybe an epic battle scene, I think it does. It does feel very TNG. So I think, even though, I mean, the goal from the start with the series was not to be, TNG reunion show. I feel like this was a little bit, but it wasn't overdone. It was very tasteful. It was a trope that we've seen before, but
right.
It felt very at home. So
it did.
Yeah,
it did.
So
yeah.
Go ahead.
Captain Jonathan Frakes obviously appears at the head of the fleet. We kind of saw the tea leaves coming on that. I think I did. I felt like I thought that line in the Nepenthe. Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I think that line in the Nepenthe was so clearly placed. Do you ever think about going back and for something big enough? Yeah, I would. In exchange to that effect, I think it was clear foreshadowing that we had not seen the last of Riker. I thought that was satisfying. He was very, very Riker, very appropriately, exactly what you would expect. It was satisfying to see him on the bridge of a ship and
with the
in the captain's chair,
Yeah.
with the Riker lean in the chair, appropriately, very much at home with his approach to this kind of situation. I think he or other exchanges, like in the Best of Both Worlds Part 2, talking to the Borg in the captain's chair, that this kind of echoes. So it just felt right. It felt very TNG, without being a TNG reunion show, like you were saying. They made it very clear that they weren't interested in doing that. And I don't think they did.
No.
I think they found a way to incorporate these characters and bring some of them together and into a situation where they have to interact, but not to make it a fan servicey reunion show. It doesn't do that.
Yeah, I think just sticking with the Riker stuff, it was just so epic. Like I was tearing up of tears of joy. It was so awesome, so epic when he goes toe to toe with the Romulan fleet. He's got all these BA ships, back behind him, but there was also, I think there was a funny moment with Picard, doing the maneuver. There was like the maneuver that was really clever. I liked that. I think, along with the Riker stuff, the exchange between Riker and Picard, like this little bromance thing that they had, it was you could feel the emotion. There was a little bit of cheesiness, obviously, but it was so good. Like it makes me want to tear up right now. So that was another. I think a lot of it maybe gets overshadowed with Riker coming in and having this epic standoff, but just that exchange between Picard and Riker, I think, was just so.
At the very end, yeah.
This was so great as well.
Yeah. No, agreed. I think seeing these characters together again, we got it obviously in Nepenthe, but Riker on the bridge of a ship, Picard on the bridge of a ship, dealing with a crisis. Very different than what we see them doing in Nepenthe. It's a much more grounded, down to earth. Very, very. It's just a whole different dynamic. So seeing these characters operate in that kind of space and on that level again was certainly satisfying. On the most basic Star Trek fan level, like you said, their exchange at the end is very true to form and
very emotional.
Yeah, nice to see. Yeah. So everything involving the fleet of Romulans and the fleet of the Federation Starfleet ships, and the way that resolves itself through negotiation or innovative diplomacy kinds of approaches, as opposed to just phasers on full spread of photon torpedoes, is nice to see. So I appreciated that. I think I was surprised that the Borg cube didn't factor more heavily into that. That cube is there, and the XBs are there, and there's some action that takes place on that ship, involving Seven of Nine and Rizzo, the Romulan agent. They kind of have some fisticuffs.
I don't know. I feel like it wasn't really a satisfying death. And it was cool to see, Seven throw down, but it's like,
sure.
We spent so much time with this character, and I don't know.
Yeah, like that to me.
And she was like,
one of the things.
She was the only one to survive that, the ritual. I feel like she was really, really important. This important agent.
Yeah.
Seven's just like, nope. Sparta kicks her off the ledge.
Yeah, her involvement, and even there, a lot of points have been made over the internet, over the Twitter discussion, and places where you would go and find people talking about Star Trek Picard. Is we don't really know what happens to Narek at the end. That's kind of left hanging, and then in kind of going hand in hand with that is this element of their brother sister, and she's dead, she's gone. We don't really know what happened to him. So that there's I don't know that there's a satisfying conclusion to those two characters, and their relationship, and that half of the Romulan part of the story. So I kind of wish there was a little bit more meat there. I one of the other things I would kind of, I don't want to say it's a knock, but I'm find curious is I think there's allusion to some like backstory potentially there that doesn't really get explored, but there's I don't know that there's, like Seven says this is for Hugh when she kills Rizzo, and that feels good for us because Hugh's is a good character that we all like. And Ian makes the point we didn't see Rizzo's body, obviously, so who knows what that means. Maybe she was beamed out. Yeah. Who knows? So yeah, who knows? That's obviously very possible. But there's not an on-screen relationship between Seven of Nine and Hugh. I mean, it stands to reason that they would have connected, and Seven gets called using Hugh's Fenris Ranger little buzzer used by Elnor. So obviously they knew each other, but having Seven sort of deliver the goods for Hugh by killing, in quotes, maybe possibly Narissa or Rizzo, whatever you want to call her.
Yeah.
I don't know how satisfying that was. Like you said, it's cool to see Seven get involved in the action and have something to do.
Yeah.
And she's great. But there are certain little things like that I think maybe could have been delivered with more gusto if the show had done different things to lead up to that.
Yeah, I like her conversation at the end, though. When she talks about how she's trying to change, not to kill someone just because they deserve
Yeah.
it. Which I think is echoing maybe how the Romulans feel about the synthetics and a bunch of other stuff. But I like Seven's moment in that too. I'm not trying to bash on Seven at
Oh yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah.
I think one of the things we have to kind of talk about Picard's resolution to talk about these moments. I think, but there's before we get to the big Picard data stuff in the last 15 minutes, each character kind of has a little moment. Each of our new characters and Seven and Rios have a scene together talking about the experience and where they are, and Seven says what you just talked about.
Yeah.
Kind of reflecting on her experience and what she wants to do differently.
Mm-hmm.
And how Rios is feeling. That's a great scene.
Mm-hmm.
Elnor and Rafi have a moment.
Yeah.
There's some nice scenes there with our new characters and Seven sort of reflecting. I think that's another highlight. But to kind of piggyback off of that, Picard obviously essentially lays down his life. And I've seen some people question, like, why did he do that? What's the point? In my mind, he was going to die anyway. He had this terminal illness, and I think he felt. I when I was watching it, I felt like he feels like this is an important thing to accelerate and have the Soji and the androids basically see that humanity is willing to do this. Like, somebody like Picard is willing to lay down his life for them to kind of to make a point and to be in solidarity with them and be on an equal playing field. So I found that I bought the necessity of at least how Picard felt and why he would accelerate that process. What they go ahead. I'm sorry. It's hard to talk about because.
But Picard has always been willing to go to bat for synthetics, androids, or whatever you want to call them. Right. We go back to Measure of a Man. Right. He's representing Data, so he has that, and also I think that he still has some baggage from what happened, before with the Romulans. So I think he wanted to just give everything that he could and prove it.
Sure.
To show humanity is capable of that. So,
right. And like he says, he has that big speech on the bridge of, in true Picard fashion. He gives this like monologue talking to Jurati about how to deal with this, and that the androids are essentially children, and how do you teach children? You lead by example.
Yeah.
So he's trying to show what humanity can be, and what the relationship could be moving forward. So I that all worked for me. I got that. That I had no issue with. It seemed like something Picard would do under those circumstances.
Yeah.
And given his diagnosis, it felt right.
Yeah.
Melissa Peterson is in the chat, who I don't believe we've seen before.
Yeah.
So welcome very much. Appreciate you stopping by. She's kind of echoing what we were just talking about. Seven avenging Hugh was good, but would have been more impactful if Seven and Hugh had interacted on screen. Couldn't agree more with that.
Yeah.
Which we would have seen that. I think Picard's sacrifice is resonant. I think the character's reaction to it is appropriate and feels fitting. I think they've had enough of experience together. Picard's kind of helped or counseled each of these characters enough over the last 10 episodes where the emotional impact felt by characters like Soji and Rios and Rafi, who obviously has a longer history with Picard personally. But these characters' reaction to Picard's demise, albeit brief, kind of, felt real, and I bought that. I felt that worked. And I felt, I mean, I don't know. Like there's a lot to potentially talk as the whole of the season, which I think we'll do in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
I think kind of look at the plot
process. Yeah. Maybe.
Give it a little time to settle and talk about the season as a whole, the story as a whole. But like the way that the android stuff resolves itself, like I said, the way I would kind of sum it up as briefly as possible, without going into too much detail as a whole, it would be that in true kind of TNG and Star Trek fashion, I felt like maybe it was a little bit rushed, and getting to the point where they make the decision to pull back. So she makes the decision to pull back, but I felt it was well done enough. I think they did a nice job selling it. I think Soji, the performance by Issa Briones, I think
Top
um,
notch.
was really really strong and sold the process that she goes through to pull back.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh,
I think it was really fitting because I think it goes back to there's a familiarity with Picard and trusting him, right? Her sister, I don't know you, but I trust you. You know, I came to you, right? There's I'm glad that they kind of she did come back because I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I
But I guess the thing with the other distant uh, intelligence, this menacing, I would have preferred. I'm not. This is not a knock. I'm just saying this. I would have preferred to be more faceless than it was. I think a little bit too exposed because it kind of draws a line in the sand. I think like the Borg was kind of menacing and that it didn't really have a face and it was really kind of unknown. I think this could have been that same type of deal. Like maybe a little bit. You use the score a little bit to
yeah, I agree with that.
to work
The
in
special effect shots.
Yeah. The tentacles. Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
save
the tentacles.
we could save it for another time when we talk about just the overarching thing. But yeah, I don't know.
I could have done without that too. I agree with that. I think it would have been more effective as sort of an unseen threat and kind of a still mysterious, like what's even coming and where is it coming from and what's it all mean. I think the more you show of that, the less scary and interesting it is for me. I think that's a small nitpick as far as I'm concerned, but I agree with you that I probably would have preferred it done a little differently. But what were you gonna say? I'm sorry.
But I like the just the payoff. I like the payoff that we've seen it done before. But the plan. This is what we're gonna do, and then show what we're gonna do. But then that's them actually doing it. I like that. I like that. A lot of the crew gets stuff to do with the soccer ball. They're working together to solve this problem.
Yeah.
I like that.
Me too.
So I'm not saying I don't like all of the payoff of of the whole season. I like it.
One of the other things that is generating a lot of conversation is this. Ian mentioned something, and Rob are talking about something. I'll double back to. There's not a whole lot to talk about there because we don't really know what they're doing, and I agree. But we'll get to that. The sonic screwdriver in quotes, the piece of equipment that use your imagination. There's a lot of discussion on that. You can find it all over Twitter. I'm curious. Like, did it bother you? Where do you fall? And do you agree with the folks that say that it was a little much?
It bothers me a little bit just because it feels like a cheat, but also it's also. But I've also knocked other series for doing the same thing, like insert cheat here, insert that,
Right.
So to me, it feels like a cheat. Again, this maybe we'll tie into maybe a later episode. Of course, I didn't really talk about the whole season entirely, but the way it's structured, I really feel that it could have benefited a little bit from a 12 to 15 episode series. I know I'm biased because I want more Star Trek, but I think there's enough things to explore in this story, right? The story is there. I just think it needs to breathe a little bit more, right? There's relationships that we can build. There's this Seven and Hugh stuff, and there's these I don't know. It maybe goes to a production standpoint. Maybe they were only given that 10 episodes just because this is the first season. Man, I really think that because then could have lengthened that story. They could have fixed the ships, done all these things, but I don't know. But to answer your question, sorry to get back.
No.
It bothered me a little bit. It just felt like a cheat. It felt like kind of a cop out. But
yeah, I think I can kind of go either way on it. Jim Morehouse, our good friend, Enterprise Extra, tweeted, something to the effect of it kind of goes hand in hand with, Soji's need to use her imagination to kind of get to the point where she can see getting to a point where she can trust organic life, basically. And is it any more or less of a cheat than delivering, a monologue of technobabble that solves the problem?
But that's Star Trek.
That's Star Trek. I know. Agreed. And that's how it's been done for 50 some years. You can get there by just building a monologue that delivers enough. But I mean that is the more comfortable way to go because what's been done. And if they had done that, the androids, somebody hands a pad to Rios, or instead of a screwdriver, basically, that fixes everything. If the pad just gave directions on how to fix it, a lot of people would go, oh, okay, androids would know how to fix that, and here's a blueprint telling you how to do it.
Yeah.
I think there would be less blowback if it had been something that simple, but it goes thematically in hand with the other lines of dialogue that have been used about needing to use your imagination and lack of imagination. It thematically kind of matches, but I'm not in love with it. I can kind of look past it. It is kind of I would agree, it's kind of a cheat, kind of easy, but I wouldn't say it was like overwhelmingly damaging to the whole. Rob and Ian mentioned a very brief shot at the very end, Seven and Rafi holding hands, and Ian's questioning, a little out of nowhere,
little out of left field. I think again, a thing we could have benefited from if we had 12 to 15 episodes, and maybe help develop that before they throw something of that magnitude into out there. So Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say I feel the same way. I'm not opposed to it.
No.
In principle, I'm I see some connective tissue there, and I can understand the attraction to maybe go there. But I just, it felt a little out of nowhere and not earned. Like there's nothing that happened over the 10 episodes that bring about any expectation that might be possible. But hey, it's. I'm open to seeing where they take it, and just because we didn't see it on screen doesn't mean things didn't happen. Seven was on the ship for a little while, in a few episodes ago. Yeah. So maybe some things went down that we didn't see. I don't know, but just got to see where they take it, I guess.
I think we should jump into
the meat of it, really.
The elephant in the room.
Yeah, I think. I talked about this a little bit on Trek After Dark last night. I think if you go back and you read the New York article that Michael Chabon wrote before Picard premiered, he talks about, spending his father's last days, spending time with his father in his last days, and connecting through Star Trek and remembering watching Star Trek together, and sitting there realizing that he's probably had his last conversation with his dad and wishing he had an opportunity to have another interaction with him. Chabon clearly had something he wanted to say and something he wanted to articulate and bring about on screen through his own experiences, and deliver it through the lens of Star Trek. And you can make a case that this entire season was a means to get to that end. This whole thing we went through was just to allow Picard to kind of have that closure with a loved one. So given the nature of who we're talking about there, that it's Picard and Data, and it's been something that not only has Picard been dealing with for the last 18, 19 years in universe, it's been a thing that's kind of stuck in the crawl of a lot of Star Trek fans. Data's death at the end of Nemesis is kind of sudden. It's kind of out of nowhere. It's final. There's no room to breathe within the universe after it's over, to kind of see the fallout of that, and to have any time to really grapple with that. So I think even Star Trek fans feel similar things to how Picard's dealing with that. So the meta nature of that, and Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but did you expect that though? Right? Because we got
No.
there's dreams and stuff that have been speculated. Is the Data? Are we gonna get Data? Is he gonna be here? Did you expect to actually get this interaction that we've been?
No.
You're right. Everyone's been longing for this. That we didn't. We felt cheated that we didn't get something, a little payoff of this relationship that has been building for 7 years on screen, and then the movies, and it's just. But did you expect that?
No, I didn't, and I didn't because it's not something. I mean, it's clearly something we should have seen it coming because it's something that the show has clearly been building toward because it's so much about Picard's emotional state and dealing with the loss of Data. I mean, that's very much he's wearing that on his sleeve throughout the show, but. In order to get to a point where something like that can happen, we needed the show to do what it did. Like Picard has to be dealing with this terminal illness. He's got to sacrifice his life. He's got to be able to be put into, like they have to get to the point where they get to a colony where, android development has been happening, and they've gotten to a point where they can dump a person's essence and brain, personality, everything that makes up the person into an android body, basically, which again is something that is very present in Star Trek's history. In TOS and other episodes of TNG, they've kind of dabbled in this. The Schizoid Man, what are little girls made of? That's not a new idea. Star Trek's been playing with that for a long time. But in order to give us a scene like we got at the end of that, we needed to get all this stuff happening, and it's that's what I mean. Like it's all a means. Everything that we got for those 10 episodes essentially is there to deliver us to this moment where Picard can have that happen in universe.
But doesn't he say that at the start of the series? He's like, well, even if this is a chance to maybe I don't know. Does he talk about how Picard talks about how he, even if there's a chance to help out or do something, or there's a sense of guilt, and he feels like he owes.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think this whole season has been building up. Even though I think that a lot of the synthetic stuff takes the front of the episode, right? But this is what we're, I guess, building up to, right?
I think when you go back and you look at it in context of where it goes, I think if you go back and you watch those first few episodes where Picard is first confronted with the idea that there's an essence of Data that's still alive somehow, somewhere, some way, and that there may be a way to connect with him one more time somehow. It's all, it's a long shot, it's a chance, it's a who knows what it'll even look like or what it'll be or how it works. But he's so driven to explore that to its fullest and see where it takes him. I think that's what gets him moving. That's what gets him off that retirement mindset and off the out of this funk and off the winery and out lifting himself into space again. That opportunity, the potential long shot opportunity to have some sort of connection with Data is what gets him moving. So I think in hindsight it was there all along. The show opens with Picard and Data sitting there playing poker in very similar, different setting, different kind of context, but that's it begins and ends with those two people together, pretty much. So it's it was clearly there all along, but I think it was incredibly satisfying to me as somebody who has had these characters in my life for the entirety of my life. As long as I've been conscious, if I go back as far as I can go in my memory, those characters were there for me, like the TNG characters. So seeing Picard and Data have one more moment, basically, and to have it be something that essentially, I don't want to say it doesn't repair Nemesis. It doesn't make Nemesis a better movie in my eyes, but it takes the things that happen in Nemesis as it relates to Data, and the demise of that character, and it gives it a little bit of new life and new context, and it's not the end anymore. It's a step. It's there's more to come, which is a whole different thing, and I love that. I think even what Picard gets to do there, to have another moment with those with that character, that's something that we all wish we could do. I mean, we all have lost people. That's something that we all deal with, and it's something that is universal. I mean, everybody wants to be able to have that last conversation that he gets to have with somebody that means a lot to him. I think that's satisfying, whether it's Picard and Data or anybody. I think it's dramatically just good TV.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's those two characters and that they have such resonance for Star Trek fans makes it even more powerful for a Star Trek fan.
Do you think you would be able to pull the plug? Pull out all the modules one by one.
I think I don't. I mean, it's incredibly difficult, but I mean, given where Picard's been and given what he knows about Data and having Data tell him what he tells him, I think, yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's easy for me to sit here and say, yeah. I believe that Picard would. I believe that after he's been through and where Picard is in life and his own exploration of his own mortality, like Melissa says, mortality's been a big theme all season. For sure. I think given what Picard's been through and how he views life and how he knows Data feels about it. I do. I believe that Picard would do it, and I would like to think I could do it too. But there are lines of dialogue in that scene that are as good as anything ever in Star Trek. I think Data's realization that what makes life precious is that it's not forever, that it's something that you have to hold on to because it's not infinite. And to kind of complete the circle and have experienced something that approaches humanity and life, it's got to end. And sitting there in some sort of middle ground state of consciousness forever is keeping him from realizing that humanity potential and feeling like he's accomplished it. That's so true to form for Data. That's such a culmination of an arc that goes back to the beginning of his time. That all goes into that. That's why I would like to think that I could do what Picard did, because I think Picard knows what it means to Data, and that's what his whole purpose has been all along to do that. And that is, it makes sense that's what he would need to do that. And there's a clip on YouTube or on Twitter, actually. Trek Core tweeted it out. There's a scene in Time's Arrow from season 5, season finale, season 5, where the episode starts. They find Data's head underground on Earth, and there's the whole time travel thing. And Geordi's talking to Data in 10-4. Did you say it? Did you watch the? And talking about his basically this very thing that the idea that he's got an end makes him more human, and it makes him just like everybody else, that it's going to end at some point, and he's not going to just outlive every friend he ever makes and just go on forever.
And he's
still
talking about that. It was just the arc. Also, just looking at a production standpoint, there's some great, beautiful shots. The set design of that whole place was just so was cool too. It was very fitting. It felt cool, and I think that some of the shots too are great with the fire and it was great.
It felt very appropriate. It felt very similar to where you find Data in All Good Things, and that it feels very like Victorian, Sherlock Holmesian, Dickensian kind of, and that's what Data's into. That makes perfect sense. That makes sense that that's where he ends up in All Good Things, and that makes sense that that's where his this
purgatory
very complex purgatory-esque simulation that he finds himself in, how it manifests. He's wearing a very similar robe, and go back and watch All Good Things and see how he appears in the future, and it's pretty similar. And I agree. There's a lot of really cool cinematography, really cool camera work. The production design and all that stuff really works in those scenes. Really evocative stuff. And in addition to the fact that the actors are obviously killing, there's a lot of chemistry and history there.
But I mean, back to the payoff, just the emotional payoff, because they talked about not just, but during the season, Picard there was this constant, did he, with did Picard tell Data that how he actually felt? You know, and Daj asked that question. You know, and they had this interaction like he did love you, and then, but he actually got to
have that conversation.
Yeah. It's just amazing. Amazing.
Like I said, that's something that I think everybody can relate to. Everybody's got people in their life that they wish they could have a conversation, and that's where the power comes in. And I think that's what Michael Chabon wanted to do all along. I think that's the whole point of this season. That's what he was getting at, because that's what he wishes he could do with his dad.
Yeah.
If you read that New Yorker, that's clearly what he's saying, and that's that he's dumping himself into the story and into Picard, and putting Picard through the same things that he's gone through. And that's what great artists do. They deliver art that is a piece of themselves. It's not just I'm writing something that takes us from A to B to C. It's the great ones are delivering a part of themselves through their art. And Chabon is clearly a great writer, and maybe one of the best we've ever had on Star Trek, if not the best pedigree. And he delivered the goods. In that last 15 minutes, and gave the whole season a resonance, and it was beyond what I expected.
Do you think that's how they got sorry, I lost my train of thought, but do you think, is that why Patrick Stewart came back? They came to him and said, hey, you're gonna get one more moment with, if you could get one more moment with Brent Spiner and pay off these two characters' relationships, or was
I think.
Go ahead.
I don't know that it was that simple, but I think the presence of Chabon and the gravitas through which that would be delivered, and the universality of that, like, wasn't just as simple as it's just Picard and Data having another moment. That that was delivered in the way that it was, and that's what the season was going to be about. That I think that pull was probably pretty strong. I'm guessing. I think it's impossible to underestimate the power of Chabon's presence. I think his reputation as a science fiction writer, as a writer in general, has such pedigree, and there's so much behind his reputation. That probably had a great deal of pull. And those the last 15 minutes, I think, delivered the goods. I mean, that was delivered on, I think, in that last 15 minutes. I think he clearly he brought it with the way he wrapped it up. There's something else I was going to say sort of related to that. Well, I mean, in order for this to happen, in order to get to that point where we could have that happen, they have to, I mean, there was a lot of speculation. I don't even know if we talked last week, but there was certainly over the last week after part one, where they delivered this information that there's a golem, there's this taking the intelligence, the personality, the essence of a person, and dumping it into an android. There were a lot of predictions the last week that's what was going to happen. They were going to have to, somehow Picard was going to end up in that golem, and that's what happened. And that ends up being the case.
See, I didn't see that. I knew someone was gonna die and they were gonna go in there. I didn't know if it was Girardi, I didn't know. But I guess now that it makes sense. That's why I don't.
Yeah, I mean, that the way for those two characters to have that moment was for that's so the thing that Picard was interacting was, in the way I understand it, is, so in Nemesis, Data tries to dump himself basically into B4, right?
Yes.
And Maddox has been messing with that and has successfully, I guess, pulled that aspect of Data out of B4 now, and has been toying with that on this planet and dealing with that. So that element, that neutron that contains Data's essence, is being housed in this machine. And now that they can do that with Picard, the process allowed these two essences to come into contact, I guess. It's complicated, and it's science fiction, and it's bizarre, and kind of impossible to explain. I'm not going to explain it better than Michael Chabon would, but in order to get to the point where that could be delivered, Picard needed to go. They needed to get. They needed to set this up so that Picard could die, and they could brain scan him and take the essence of him and do something else.
Yeah.
Other than that, the power of that moment is Picard. It's not a dream. It's not, a holodeck simulation. It's the essence of Picard, and it's the essence of Data through this complex, science fiction-y, technobabble-y
could they have put the essence of Data into the Golem, into the soulless, artificial, fully human? I don't know what you call it.
Maybe that's what they were working toward.
I think
maybe that's why Data's essence there.
I like to. Also, just the research purposes, because all this is stemming from Data, obviously. But I think in my headcanon, that's what they were working towards. But who knows?
The urgency of being able to save Picard, and kind of they used it for that, and then Picard comes out of this and says Data doesn't want that. Data wants
to die.
There to be a finite existence, and he wants to die essentially.
Which, I mean, they could have done, because they did that with Picard, right? They gave him a time. What he would normally live to. So yeah, I don't know, but I'm not knocking it at all. This it was great.
Well, yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that makes this kind of hard to. The thing that I'm having the hardest time wrapping my head around is that I'm so satisfied with that last 15 minutes and where it ends up. And it's so specific, and it's so laid out a certain way so that we can get to those last 15 minutes. That issues that I might have, and things I might have done differently, and things I wish were a little alternate with the way we get there, are easy to set aside because I'm so satisfied with the way that it wraps and where it delivers us. That's something that I didn't even know I needed, and didn't even know that I wanted for Picard and Data to have that last opportunity, but. Having seen it and having seen the build up to it, it's some of my favorite Star Trek ever. I think it's some of the best, most satisfying stuff that we've gotten, and I'm just grateful that it exists. And the last time we see Data isn't.
Nemesis.
I mean, it is his physical being. The last name is on the scimitar and Nemesis, but that's not the finite end of that journey, and Picard's relationship to it. I love the dialogue about how, and it's so true. Like Picard says something like, before I could even think, you had come up with what you were going to do and executed it, and it was done. And it was the most Data thing you ever did. Like and it's true. Like Data runs up to him, he takes out that little portable transporter thing and slaps it on Picard, and Picard's gone before Picard can even say a word about what they're going to do or how they're going to deal with it. Picard's kind of in a daze. And, assuming he's about to die, but I love Picard's callback to that because it's so true. You can kind of see it on his face. He's pissed. He's like, wait a second, and that's on screen, and you get that they get to have that conversation. Picard gets to call back to that and reference it, and it's such a special thing that it exists.
Yeah.
I've been saying, I said it last night a bunch of times, the Blue Skies is stuck in my head in a way that it never has been.
Yeah.
even when Nemesis was out, maybe it was stuck in my head a little bit then, but I've been humming it for 3 days now. You can find that on YouTube and on iTunes Music if you have that. The version in the episode, which is actually sung by Issa Bree, plays Soji. I didn't know that until the other day. But yeah,
she's talented. She can sing,
she's talented.
act, do whatever.
Yep. She's really good.
But
I think in the next couple of weeks we're going to talk about the season as more of a whole, and characters that we loved and performances that we loved. I think we'll get into all that in the future. We want to try to keep this kind of isolated to what we got in this hour, this episode, and a little bit of the last week too. We'll get into more of a summarizing look back in the future.
I think Bill's right. I think we're going to wrap it up here. I think there's still a lot to cover. I think this is not the end of Core Setting. Obviously, there's going to be more episodes to come. There's a lot to discuss, not just this episodes, but the whole season, right? So we're going to have some coverage of that. the discussion doesn't have to stop here. Twitter and Discord are the best two ways to keep the discussion going and get a hold of us. So, yeah, had a great time talking Picard this season. It's always fun to do recaps and talk about the episode of the week. I'm going to miss that. I'm going to miss coming on here and discussing and speculating and doing that. So, hopefully not too soon, or not too far away.
Not too far away.
We'll have some more Discovery, and then Lower Decks and all of the other shows that are coming.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to use this as a method to kind of keep looking back at Picard as we get more context and more time to let it settle. Like we were saying, like take a more summarizing look, maybe spotlight some characters. Like, or this is if Discovery's a few months off, we'll occasionally be popping on to course heading for bigger picture looks at Picard and how it's settling for us. So
yeah.
Stay tuned for more.
So probably won't see you next week, but we do have Trek Live next week, so definitely check that out. So in that regards, we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.